Good afternoon, class. As most of you are aware, public and private schools are closed in Barbados today due to the present weather conditions. I know you guys are happy to get the afternoon off. Nevertheless, in this super technological age, class is still on. So here goes. We're going to be discussing WSUS in this session. Windows Server Update Services. Windows Server Update Services is a role. This role is meant to help administrators manage the distribution of updates that are released from the Microsoft site to computers on the network. The topics that we're going to be looking at are WSUS scenarios, single server scenario, independent scenario, autonomous mode, and replica mode. In section 2 of WSUS, we're going to be looking at installing WSUS. And in section 3, we're going to be looking at configuring computer groups, server-side targeting, client-side targeting, and configuring clients using group policy. The first scenario we want to look at is the scenario where your updates are going to come from the Microsoft site. In this example, you can see that you have a network of computers. And if you look at the path, you will see that here you have a WSUS server on the internet. If this is the scenario in your workplace, you're going to be using a lot of bandwidth because each of these computers will have to go through the internet to the Microsoft Update site to download updates. Every Windows operating system is configured for client automatic update from the Microsoft site. You simply have to turn on updates. So again, the scenario that you have before you would be one where every single client connect to the Microsoft Update site to get updates. Now let's look at some other scenarios. In this second scenario, you have the network itself, but there's a difference. You don't want each computer to go to the Microsoft Update server to download updates. And even if you did that, then you're not going to have control over the updates that the clients download. And you would not want that on your network. You would want the clients to be able to download the updates that you approve. That would be much more efficient and it would help save internet bandwidth. So in this scenario, we have in our network a WSUS server. This is a server that you will be installing the WSUS server role on. The purpose that this server will serve is that instead of the updates going to each individual client, you will configure this internal WSUS server to get the updates from the Microsoft Update site. And then the clients now in turn will get their updates from your internal server. So all the clients again, instead of communicating with this Microsoft Update server, they're going to communicate with the WSUS server that you have configured on your network. And that is called the single server scenario. This scenario is called the independent scenario. In this scenario, we have two separate networks, and each one of them operate independently. The network on the left will go to the Microsoft Update site, and the Microsoft Update site will send the updates to the WSUS server that has been installed in this network. The client computers will get their updates from the internal SUS server. The same thing will happen with the network on the right. So both of them are independent. And for this type of scenario, you're going to need two separate network administrators. And this is not a common scenario nowadays at all. The next scenario is what we call the autonomous mode. And let's go back here to the independent scenario first before we move on. Remember that with this scenario, we're going to have two separate networks and they will have individual administrators. This next scenario is a little different. You still have two networks, the network on the left, the network on the right. You have the WS server on the left-hand side, which will get its updates from the Microsoft Update server right here. That means it's going to synchronize with the Microsoft Update server. And the clients in turn will get their updates from the internal server. The network on the right-hand side, the second network, will not go out to the WSUS server to get updates. As you can see, the two networks are connected. The server on the second network will get its updates from the server on the right-hand side, the first network. The server on the left is referred to as the downstream server, and the server on the right-hand side is referred to as the upstream server. The computers on the right-hand side will get their updates from the server on the left. But there is one difference. The server on the right-hand side, for the network on the right, will have an administrator, and that administrator has to approve updates for its own clients. So while the network on the right, their WSUS server will go to get updates from the WSUS server on the left, the administrator for the network on the left will not approve the updates for the server on the right. And that's why we refer to as the autonomous mode. So we refer to the scenario here on the right-hand side as the autonomous mode because the approval of updates does not synchronize from the upstream server to the downstream server. The downstream server has an administrator, and that administrator has to approve updates for its own clients. Our next scenario is called the replica mode, and still, this is a bit different. It is exactly the same as the autonomous mode, but with one particular exception. Approvals are not done by the second WSUS server as in the last scenario that we looked at, the autonomous mode, but they are done by the server on the left. So the server on the left will get the updates from the internet, from the WSUS server on the internet, and the administrator on that network, the network to the left, will approve those updates. So the approvals and the updates are then replicated over to the second WSUS server so that you really need only one administrator. And that one administrator lives on the WSUS server on the left-hand side of the screen. Then we have another scenario called the disconnected scenario. And as you can see here, the two networks are not connected at all. There's a break right here. There's no connection between the two. So what happens in this case is the network on the left has its own WSUS server, and that server is synchronized with a Microsoft update server on the internet. And it gets its updates from the Microsoft update server and passes those updates to the WSUS, who in turn will get the updates to the clients on its network. However, because there is no internet connection between the two networks, what will happen is that the updates done on the WSUS to the left will have to be saved on media and physically put on the server to the right. And that's why we call it the WSUS disconnected scenario. For our next session, we're going to look at installing WSUS. And then for our third session of SUS, we're going to look at configuring WSUS, configuring computer groups, and configuring clients. That is the end of section 1 of WSUS.